The WWE, or once WWF, or once WWF, has been around for so many years, there are plenty of misconceptions. Some of them are actually conceptions, if that makes any sense, but you know the deal, especially with the rise of social media. Sometimes somebody will say something, and then that just becomes the truth. That's kind of how wrestling works anyway. Kevin Nash once said that the only true thing about wrestling is the money and the miles. There's definitely something to that. And it's just always going to be baggage that the sports entertainment business has, because again, you're always trying to pull the wool over somebody's eyes. But today we are going to go through a few of these and try and work out the fact from the fiction. So I am Simon Miller. I'm really bald. Let's go. Number 11, the failure of a WWE-owned WCW was the fault of WCW. So maybe that doesn't describe what we're going to talk about the best way, but we all know that when eventually the WWE, the then WWF, bought World Championship Wrestling, everybody got pumped because we thought we were about to get a bunch of dream matches. Instead, we got the invasion angle, and I think it's fair to say it didn't really work out like we had hoped. I mean, let's not forget that Stone Cold Steve Austin and Kurt Angle were on Team Alliance at one point, and then there was that SummerSlam 2001 match when The Undertaker and Kane took on Diamond Dallas Page and Chris Kanyon. I mean, if you look up the word humiliation in the wrestling dictionary, you're probably going to see this: the Brothers of Destruction killed him. Now, of course, Vince McMahon was over the moon to finally purchase his competition. You can see it on that simulcast episode of Nitro/Raw. But ultimately, he didn't really need the company at this point, because in March 2001, the WWF Attitude Era was huge. You also had the issue of the fact that every single WCW guy that walked into that locker room had to deal with a sort of war, because for the last 5 years, everybody had learned to distrust WCW, so you ain't just gonna walk into our house and get what you want. Then, of course, none of the actual big stars came across because they wanted to see out their turn of contracts, which makes all the sense in the world. You got to stay at home, rest up, and my gosh, you got a lot of money. So it does kind of mean that even if a Goldberg, a Ric Flair, and a Hulk Hogan had walked back in 2001, maybe this wouldn't have helped anyway, because again, you would have had Steve Austin, The Rock, The Undertaker, all going to the boss and saying, bro, we just helped you kick those guys' ass. They probably shouldn't be pushed how we are, and they definitely don't deserve the same cash. So really, when you do think about it and you put your wrestling head on, this was always going to be a bust. Everybody on every side would have had to have been happy to work together, and ultimately there was just one guy calling the shots. And history is always written by the victors. Why we can't have nice things. But yeah, WWE absolutely did this to itself. And I actually think looking back, they're pretty damn proud of it. But 10 things are different now they're owned by TKO. Now, depending on who you talk to, I'm sure you can find some truth in this. But now we have been under the TKO leadership for a couple of years. Well, everything just kind of feels the same. You could actually argue it's a little bit worse. This actually goes to an interview that happened yesterday as I am talking to you, when the bigwigs of TKO actually admitted they're not happy with ticket prices at the moment, because when Vince McMahon ran WWE, he was all into family prices, whereas TKO would like WWE to match the yield of UFC. You are a fan of MMA and you go to Ultimate Fighting Championship shows, you know how much those seats cost. So if you think WWE is expensive now, hold on to your horses, my friends. Here we go. It's only fair to say that worth always comes down to what somebody is willing to pay for something. So if you do believe that 10 grand for a front row seat at WrestleMania is worth it, then more power to you. The issue is the more we do that, the more the other seats go up, and eventually just price everybody out anyway. Bottom line though is much like Vince McMahon, TKO just want to make money. That's probably why WrestleMania 43 is going to Saudi Arabia. So yeah. WWE is just the same as it always has been, and probably will be this way until one day it dies. But I'll be long gone before that, and when I do pop my clogs, well, I'm sure a front row seat will be 100 grand, and somebody on the internet will be happy about this, because tribalism sucks. There's a different video for a different day. Number 9, Bret Hart vs. Shawn Michaels was a classic WWE rivalry. So actually, if you take all aspects of the Bret Hart-Shawn Michaels story, it is an absolute classic. I know so many people who got into the behind-the-scenes culture because of those two guys. They could not believe they were actually kicking each other's ass in locker rooms and that they didn't like each other. All of a sudden, wrestling was more real than it ever had been. We better keep tuning in. They also had a very similar path in the sense they were both being pushed during a time when WWE was finally focusing on smaller wrestlers. So ultimately, their successes were going to help a lot of other people walk through the WWE door. There is one glaring thing missing from all of this and actually got taken away from us during the Montreal Screwjob: a truly great match between the two. Now, I do think Survivor Series 1997 is their best one, but of course it does get cut short. And when you talk about the WrestleMania 12 Iron match today, my gosh, it divides the audience right down the middle. I actually think it's pretty decent, but I also understand those who don't think it's aged that well, mostly because we took a risk and they went nothing for the entire hour. And really, given the stipulation, you need a few falls. That's what makes it so special. And look, most of the matches they did have were pretty damn good. But in terms of that one jewel in the crown that you would tell everybody else, oh man, you gotta see this Bret Shawn match. There was too much shenanigans and there was too much nonsense. And all the conversation devolves into is, maybe we should go and watch the Montreal Screwjob. I am talking to you in September 2025, and I think, like all of us, I'm just a little bit bored of it. So in terms of on-the-screen action, this was taken away from us, but we also know the reason why. It's because backstage, the pair hated each other, and that's why they kept spinning off into their own things. I do think it's important to say that without Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, we probably don't have wrestling as it is today. So they both deserve our undying respect. Number 8, the Attitude Era was one grand plan. So Paul Heyman would be the first guy to tell you that one of the big reasons for the Attitude Era boom is because Vince McMahon looked at what ECW was doing and stole a lot of the ideas. That's most definitely true. But to act like the Attitude Era overall wasn't one of many happy accidents, well, I do think that's a little bit of a misconception. Let's go through some of the major beats, or the King of the Ring 1996, that Steve Austin wasn't even slated to win. The only reason that did go down is because Triple H, who was going to be the victor, got in trouble for the curtain call, so we had to move the cards around. Even after he had become the king, Austin wasn't truly recognized as the guy until Bret Hart returned in October, which was months later, but by that point the Hitman was saying, hey, you know this Steve guy? He's probably the best wrestler in the company. That part was intentional. He was still a heel late in 1996 though, and the babyface turn actually happened in drips and drabs over the next weeks and months, and that's when the WWF started to think to themselves, oh my gosh, we may have something here, we better make a total change. This was also a response to what WCW was doing with the NWO, so I don't want to criticize the WWF too much because it is important you do change with the times, but to act like they had this written down on a piece of paper, well, I think they did. In fact, if you do watch the television today, it really does feel like they do not pull the trigger until they know the rattlesnake is an absolute banker. And you get to WrestleMania 14 and there's no looking back. Suppose you could compare this to Daniel Bryan's rise in 2013 and 2014. The WWE just fought that until they couldn't fight it anymore, and that's when they made the change. And maybe Austin didn't have to struggle that much, but believe you me, he wasn't meant to be the guy. He just got there because he was one of the best of all time. Number 7, Vince McMahon couldn't wait to fire the Ultimate Warrior. So we all remember the infamous self-destruction of the Ultimate Warrior DVD, which actually is rather mean. Not saying the Ultimate Warrior didn't bring a lot of this on himself, but it was just so damn spiteful, man. And everybody just went in on the dude. It all came off the fact that when he did leave the WWE in 1996, it was just so controversial. And then when he arrived in WCW in 1998, well, that was terrible. He then went on a speaking tour of college campuses where he was most definitely homophobic and racist, and there's no excuse for that. He shouldn't have done it, and if you were a fan of his and that upsets you, it should do. It was a real letdown. His first exit from the World Wrestling Federation came in 1991 though, and everybody likes to think that Vince McMahon couldn't wait to get rid of the guy, but I don't actually think that's true at all. They did butt heads, so Vince felt like he did have to show him the door. But if we move forward in the timeline, he rang up the Ultimate Warrior and said come back in 1992. He then did it again in 1996. And if you go on the internet right down and do your research, one Jim Hellwig was also offered a monster deal in 1997. That's right, he would have been a part of the Attitude Era. And can you imagine how pissed off Bret Hart would have been? He had to end his 20-year deal because Vince McMahon couldn't afford it, but he loved the Ultimate Warrior so much, he was going to pay him millions of dollars. Now again, 1 year later, he was in World Championship Wrestling and that didn't work out at all, but let's not pretend they fell out and that was the end of the relationship. I think Vince McMahon quite liked the Ultimate Warrior, wanted to make it work. Both guys were just too crazy, which is the story a lot in the world of stupid pro wrestling. Number 6, Hogan Andre and the WrestleMania 3 firsts. Now there is nothing wrong with telling a few white lies when it comes to professional wrestling, even more so when you're trying to promote WrestleMania 3 back in 1987. There's a reason they packed out that dome with that many people. They sold the idea, and everybody wanted to see Hogan versus Andre. Given how much the World Wrestling Federation had exploded by then, there were so many fans who didn't care about what Hulk and Andre had done in their past wrestling lives, nor were they going to go out of their way to find out for themselves. It meant that they could watch this event and just decide, yes, this is the first meeting between the two, and yes, Hulk Hogan has never slammed Andre the Giant before, but then many a documentary was released years after this, and all of that was a pile of baloney. A lot of them were on the WWE Network. Because yes, Hogan and the Giant had wrestled many times before, and every now and then they would actually flip around in terms of heel and babyface. If you are able to find footage of this too, I don't want to be that guy, but you will also see the Hulkster slamming Andre over and over again. So the epic climax of WrestleMania 3, well, it certainly wasn't the debut of that. Furthermore, lots of people, of course, had slammed Andre the Giant throughout his career. Hulk Hogan wasn't doing that for the first time on that night. But doesn't it make a good story? Yes. And of course, if you want to jump in deeper with this, you can find interviews where Hogan exaggerates Andre's weight from 500 pounds to 700 pounds to eventually 1,000 pounds, which is why he had back injuries later in his life. None of that is true whatsoever. Andre the Giant was a professional man. If he wanted to go up, that mother flubber was going up. Number 5, tag team wrestling suffered because of a lack of talent. Now this one is not true at all, and it is Lance Storm who talks about this very eloquently on Wrestling Observer Live alongside Brian Alvarez. The reason tag team wrestling suffered so much in the WWE is because Vince McMahon didn't really like tag team wrestling. Bruce Pritchard on his podcast has confirmed this in the sense that Vince saw it as a dollars and cents thing. He would rather book 2 single stars going against each other because it cost him less. As a businessman, he would make more money. The other issue is that basically during the entire Ruthless Aggression era, there was no such thing as tag teams, because all we would do is take one single star and put them with another single star and then give them a stupid name. The coolest thing about tag team wrestling is the chemistry between the two individuals, so when it's just random guys pretending they're friends, well, you're never going to buy into that as much as anything else. Those tag team titles were also thrown around like they were candy. I mean, you could just tell that Vince McMahon didn't give a damn. It's why you need to give all the praise to the likes of Edge and Christian, the Hardy Boys, the Dudley Boys, and in later years, the Usos and the New Day, who got this all back on track. And why do you think the Revival left the WWE to become FTR and AEW? They care about the division, man. They wanted to be somewhere where they could showcase that as much as possible. So really, if you do want to sum it up as easy as we can, Vince McMahon just couldn't be bothered to pay for tag team wrestling. Look, it was his company. He can do whatever the hell he wants, but for this bored a-hole, I love a bit of tag team action, so it was always a little bit sad to see. Number 4, the WWE Women's Revolution. So I think it is fair to say that the WWE was a bit late of leaving behind the Divas era and allowing women just to be women wrestlers. But if you go back to the Attitude Era, you can find the female performers telling you, we were told we couldn't even hit like the guys, and we essentially just had to do cat fights. Think of all the great talent we would have lost along the way. That really is a silly decision to make. Eventually, the Give Divas a Chance hashtag trended on Twitter, which allowed this to fall into motion, and AJ Lee does deserve a lot of credit for that. She had responded to a Stephanie McMahon tweet about equal women's pay and was all like, well, maybe you could pay us equally too. I mean, we quite literally work for your company. There was also the massive problem that you could have a 3-hour Raw and you would get one women's match that got about 3 minutes. I mean, if you were Michelle McCool, Beth Phoenix, Natalya, AJ Lee, or the Bella Twins, how were you meant to prove you were any good at this when somebody was only giving you 180 seconds? Of course, soon Becky Lynch, Charlotte Flair, Sasha Banks, and Bayley became the 4 horsewomen in NXT and totally changed this. But no, WWE was not the first company to present women like this. I mean, TNA was always doing it very well in the knockouts, and if you jump over to Japan, man, those women have been killing it for decades. So if we are going to be honest with this, the WWE was actually just a little bit behind the curve. It's one of the reasons Ronda Rousey got pushed so hard, because that was one of the catalysts that made Vince McMahon realize women could sell pay-per-views. And yes, that's a really stupid sentence. Now, it's way better today than it was 10 years ago, but we can still do more. But yeah, if anything, WWE was last in the queue. That ain't great when you're the market leader. Number 3, WWF to WWE was a philosophical shift. I cannot believe we are talking about this, but my gosh, does it show what nonsense we can throw out there. But if you did watch the Ruthless Aggression era on the WWE network that came out a few years ago, we were told the reason that Vince McMahon changed the WWF to WWE is because he wanted to create a brand new driving force for the entire company. Listen, I don't want to be horrible, but that is a total non-truth. Because back in 2002, the reason we had to get the F out is because the World Wildlife Fund felt like the World Wrestling Federation had ignored the agreement they'd had in place for years, mostly because Vince McMahon went and registered WWF.com, and that was something the Panda people didn't want him to do. Now, they were totally right in this when you did go through the deal the companies had struck years and years ago, but McMahon basically decided, well, I don't care, and what the flub are they going to do to me? Well, they took him to court, they won, and that's why we had to change the entire name, and believe you me, for a good old while people hated this because you just can't say the WWE. It doesn't make any sense. The WWF did make sense because it's the World Wrestling Federation, but if you say the WWE, it means the World Wrestling Entertainment, and you sound like you're an alien from Mars. But do not let anybody tell you otherwise. This was done because a lawyer told Vince McMahon he was in breach of an agreement, and he was, and he paid the price. That's about the end of it. Number 2, Ruthless Aggression was an era. Or was it just a little bit of marketing because Vince McMahon saw how good the Attitude Era had done and he wanted to carry it on? I don't think it lasts all that long either. You can probably put it between the years 2002 and 2008, because soon after that the WWE did strike their deal with Mattel and realized they could get more advertisers if they turned into a PG company, so they did. All of a sudden, no more swearing and no more flubbed up storylines. Vince McMahon even came out on Raw one day with the entire roster around the ring and just started saying over and over again, who is going to show me Ruthless Aggression? And of course, we sent John Cena out to confront Kurt Angle during his debut. And what did he say to the Olympic gold medalist? I've got Ruthless Aggression. Nobody was doing that in the Attitude Era. Steve Austin didn't confront The Rock and be like, oh, hey, son, it's Attitude Era time. Because all we were doing was trying to rebrand this in the hope that people would tune back in. And I suppose it worked a little bit, but really, we had just hit our first drop, and wrestling is cyclical. It was going to take about a decade before it picked up again. If you do watch the television around this time as well, there are weeks and weeks where this concept is pushed hard, and then everybody stops talking about it when they realized it hasn't worked, that business is sagging. So of course we use it today to define a period, but in terms of it actually being a thing, well, we kind of made it up. Number 1, Vince McMahon made pro wrestling huge. Now he did make WWE huge and forever changed the trajectory of professional wrestling, and for that we do have to give him a lot of credit. Like, would I be watching it in the guise I am now without Vince McMahon? The argument is probably not. But you cannot pretend that he was the guy that came along and took wrestling out of these small smoky buildings or bars, because you can go to many a territory that was alive in the USA in the 70s and 80s and see them pull huge houses. And no, they wouldn't be comparable to what WrestleMania would go on to do, but they were still pretty damn massive. A lot of them had incredible production values. A name we can always throw in there is Jim Londos, because during the early 1900s, most people described him as a mega draw, and not like anything the business had seen until Hulk Hogan arrived in the 1980s. I mean, back in the 1930s, Londos was Madison Square Garden's first ever major drawing card, routinely pulling in 20,000 people to the world's most famous arena. In 1933, Jim also visited his home nation of Greece to see his father, and he drew 70,000 people to a stadium for a match against Kola Kurane. The rumor was there was an extra 20,000 more people outside of the venue because they just wanted to be part of the magic. Listen, these are numbers that people would die for. He also broke US attendance and box office records when he took on long-standing rival Edge Strangler Lewis, which had a gate of $96,000. If we do use one of those inflation machines for 2025, that would be around about $2 million today. That's pretty amazing. So you can't take away what Vince McMahon did do, because he did revolutionize the game, but to act like he made sports entertainment popular, he did not. Though he did come up with sports entertainment, which is still a stupid name. That's why I use it, my friends. It makes me laugh. So I loved WCW. I was a WWF kid, but there was just a few years where you had to flip back and forth with the television channel controller thingamajig because you wanted to know what was going to happen on both. It's very stressful and fun. And sure, yes, the year 2000 could be some of the worst television you ever see in your life, but actually it's so bad it becomes good again. And given that WCW died over 2 decades ago, if you can believe it, there are a lot of misconceptions. Hello, I am Simon Miller, and we're going to talk about some of them today and figure out what's true and what's a pile of crap. Number 12, early WCW was the home of real wrestling. So this is nonsense, and it happens anytime any kind of modern wrestling does goofy wrestling, which is for life, where people go, oh my gosh, back in the day, wrestling companies never used to do this. Yes, they did. You can go back all the way to the 70s, and you will watch something that is essentially a carnival. Sports entertainment has always been a thing. It was just Vince McMahon that coined it, and you can even go all the way back to 1988, when Ted Turner essentially said, oh, I'm going to take this NWA thingamajig and turn it into WCW, even though a lot of what they did do was still National Wrestling Alliance. And absolutely you get stuff like the Cheatown Rumble when Ric Flair and Steamboat were doing their thing. But around the same time, at least a couple years later, you get Oz. Kevin Nash walking out like he was a Wizard of Oz character. And even before then, essentially around the time the Nature Boy and Steamboat were doing their thing, you get the Ding Dongs. There you go, that's the Ding Dongs. You think that is serious wrestling? You can kiss my But it was just totally wild because you'd also then get Sting and Terry Funk doing stuff. So in many ways, watching the WWF was a less nuts experience because you knew that a lot of that stuff was going to be silly. Whereas WCW, you kind of sat there going, listen, anybody could come down the aisle next, I have no idea. So let us stop pretending that one day all of a sudden wrestling became totally nonsensical. It's always been nonsensical. And if we're honest, that's why it's so damn good. Number 11, the Cruiserweight division died with Oklahoma. I mean, it certainly did take a hit, because yes, here is Oklahoma, which was Ed Ferrara doing a terrible Jim Ross impression, which was genuinely offensive. And you can see by this image, no, he was not a Cruiserweight, and yet for some reason he still won the Cruiserweight Championship. And then he feuded with Medusa. Now listen, this isn't on Medusa's feet. It wasn't her fault, but all of this was absolutely terrible. And of course, it came from the mind of Ed and Vince Russo. They were running the show. Of course they were. It did not kill the championship though, because after that, there was still a bunch of amazing names that stood up to ensure we did do better by this championship. You had Elix Skipper, you had Shane Helms, you had Chavo Guerrero, and a bunch more who realized, oh my gosh, this whole cruiserweight idea is one of the reasons WCW did become so popular. So even though numbers are going in the wrong direction, let's do what we can. It's also what Eric Bischoff hung his hat on in many ways. When he did finally take over WCW, he looked at the American wrestling landscape scene and was like, well, maybe we can go down to Mexico and over to Japan and show these audiences there is more than one style. And genuinely, for a few years, it was absolutely brilliant. And that Cruiserweight title meant something. And even in March 2001, when WCW was about to die at their Greed pay-per-view, not only did we introduce tag team Cruiserweight belts, but Shane Helms was just a man, as he had an amazing match for that title. And I'm sure if they hadn't have all of a sudden gone, this would have continued. It also means that World Championship Wrestling was doing the flippy-dippy-doo-dah stuff right till the end. Again, that was a calling card. We cannot let gibberish like Oklahoma take away from that. Number 10, the WCW guaranteed contracts. So there is a long-touted story that Eric Bischoff just loved spending money. We even called him ATM Eric. And every single person that came through the door, he was like, woohoo, here's a brand new special guaranteed contract. And listen, we will talk about that a little bit later. But in terms of him being the first guy, that is not true. Now, the comparison back then was the fact that Vince McMahon was essentially offering you like $150 for 10 dates, but you would make way more than that based on gates and merchandise or whatever else they were going to do. Like, nobody made that amount. But when WCW was like, look, don't worry about all these business metrics, here's the moolah you are going to put in your pocket, well, that became very exciting. If we actually go through the books, though, and jump into history, even Hulk Hogan in the AWA was offered a flipping guaranteed deal. Do you think he jumped to the WWF without saying, Vince, I'm going to need another one of these? Of course he didn't. Now, yes, that's a Hulk Hogan story, so we do have to take it with a pinch of salt, but again, there's loads of other wrestlers that are like, no, I got this too. And also, not all of these guaranteed contracts Eric Bischoff did hand out were for millions of dollars. Like when he lured Lex Luger back over, he offered him $150,000 a year, which was not considered top guy money at the time. But he didn't really want Lex to come back, and he wanted Lex to prove a point. So let's not run around going, oh my gosh, he overspent on everybody, because he didn't. Now, there are some individuals who did get way too much, but you gotta balance the books. Number 9, WCW is where the old guys play. Now, it does make sense to talk about this, because around about the mid-90s, the WWF made this their entire campaign. If you want to watch old man Hulk Hogan and old man Randy Savage doing their thing, that's fine, but we've got the new generation. At the same time, they had Jake Roberts versus Jerry Lawler. Now listen, no problem with that. They're a couple of goats, but it kind of goes to show it was just marketing. When you actually look at both rosters, they were basically the same. I mean, really the WWF's biggest problem is that they overly focused on this, and we had those awful skits featuring the Huckster and the Nacho Man. It was like, all right, man, you keep talking about all these brand new wrestlers. Can we see them? Then we got a bunch of cartoon characters. So this really isn't what it seemed like. And the whole point is age doesn't actually matter in pro wrestling if you are connecting with the audience and you can still go. So sure, WCW had a bunch of veterans, the WWF had a bunch of veterans, and then there was like loads of people bubbling underneath. Now listen, World Championship Wrestling did get it so poorly because they would never build new stars, but in pretending it was all a bunch of 4-year-olds, say it again, it's not true. Number 8, WCW Thunder was born out of Eric Bischoff's ego. When Thunder debuted in January 1998, WCW Nitro was the most popular wrestling show in the world, and it was trumping Raw. That's why many fans thought, oh, we can see what Eric Bischoff is doing. He has commissioned a second show because he wants to build on the success of what they were doing on Monday nights. Once again, that's a fallacy. It was the Ted Turner executives who were like, oh my gosh, we can take advantage of it. And Bischoff even pushed back like, this is a really bad idea, but you don't get to argue with the suit. It's one of the reasons he wanted to try and bring Bret Hart in, because he was like, oh man, we can build the entire show around him. Where once again, Ted Turner and friends were like, no, we need every single star on Thursday nights as well. Otherwise, what's the point? This was meant to be a brand split before the brand split, but people said no. Therefore, Thunder wasn't about Eric Bischoff's ego at all, but it was about WCW pushing their luck. Which is somewhat ironic because like 3 years later, they go out of business because they did go too far in one direction. Just goes to show how quickly things in the wrestling business can change. Number 7, they didn't create homegrown stars. Go tell that to Booker T. I think he'll be quite annoyed. Then maybe have a word with Sting. Then maybe have a word with Bill Goldberg. I'm pretty sure all of these people became massive in WCW. DDP also used it as a massive jumping off platform, and you had Chris Jericho, you had Dean Malenko, you had Eddie Guerrero, and a bunch of other people, which would lure fans in to check out WCW. And once again, don't get me wrong, they were held down, but if you were just watching the 2-hour block of Monday Nitro, well, they still felt like a big deal, and they still were getting TV time. It also got even bigger when they got to WWE because they used WCW as their foundation. And once again, the story is true that the likes of Hulk Hogan and who knows who else held everybody down. And then also, I kind of just touched upon it, what did WWE do at every single avenue they could? They tried to sign these guys because they thought they were stars of the wrestling industry. And they were made in WCW. It's a little bit of a paradox. Number 6, David Arquette ruined the big gold belt. I mean, him winning it didn't help, although I always like to shout out David Arquette, because he not only went to WCW creative team and said, this is a really bad idea, but all the money he earned from this run, he gave it to wrestling families who had suffered tragedies. That is a good dude. On the 26th of April 1999, though, David Arquette, the Hollywood actor, did win the WCW World Championship in an absolute schmoz on Thunder, because Vince Russo thought this would be a great way to increase the ratings. Wasn't. The thing is, though, you need to go back and watch the TV before this for a big chunk of time, because WCW was already doing a bunch of nut stuff. Like in January, we had the Finger Poke of Doom, and this WCW Championship changed hands so many times, you couldn't take it seriously. So by the time David did have it around his waist, they were like, well, of course that's going to happen. I mean, next is probably going to be Elmo. I mean, you could argue the whole Kevin Nash and Hulk Hogan boop thing was way worse, because they were meant to be serious wrestlers. This is mostly because Vince Russo thought championship belts were nothing more than props, and you shouldn't have any emotion attached to them. So yeah, it was long dead, way before David Arquette had anything to do with it, and it's always salvageable. But by the time WCW got their fingers in gear, whatever that means, the company died. Number 5, insert famous terrible moment here. Because there were loads of these, such as the Finger Poke of Doom, or putting Judy Bagwell on a forklift, or having a Viagra on a pole match. You kind of already see what my point is here. There wasn't one terrible moment that killed WCW. It was a lot of things, and then somebody else pulled the plug. Because WCW would have continued to trundle forward in 2001 if the executives of the show had wanted to continue it, but Jamie Kellner, who got promoted to a very high position, was like, I don't like wrestling. I think it's terrible. I think it drags this station down. I want it cancelled. I want it gone. That was that. Had no more TV time. Without TV time, your television show isn't worth anything. WWE buys it, the end. And yes, of course, once again, Hogan deciding to just touch Kevin Nash to win their biggest prize absolutely contributed, because if WCW was making the kind of money they were in 1998 and 2001, somebody could have pushed back against Kellner and went, no man, this is a cash cow. But we hadn't have done that. But if somebody, anybody that was wearing a tie had just vouched for WCW, it probably would have hung around, but that didn't happen. So in terms of the person that pulled the trigger, it was Mr. Jamie. I mean, imagine WCW today, it would have been totally fine. It could have gone to a streaming service, or who knows where. It could have predominantly existed on the internet, but that wasn't happening at the turn of the century. So there was nowhere else to go. Number 4, Bret Hart deserves zero blame for his run. So I do kind of lean in Bret's favor a little bit here, because I mean, the first thing that WCW had him do, his debut, was coming out at the end of Sting versus Hulk Hogan at Starrcade 1997 and going, oh man, that fast count shouldn't have happened, even though there was no fast count. So from minute 1, we put the Hitman in a stupid position. The deeper issue, though, is everything that Bret Hart had just gone through, because he was quite clearly suffering after the Montreal screw job. So if you want to make the argument that his heart wasn't in it, ironically, well, I'd probably agree with you. There's also the fact that he never wanted to leave the WWF, and he certainly never wanted to join WCW. I guess he was just spinning his wheels here. He wanted something to come and grab him storyline-wise, and he wasn't given it. So every week that went by, he kind of just checked out. I mean, a great example of WCW not helping him is when the Wrestling with Shadows documentary was released, everybody sided with Bret, but because WCW was so worried that crowds would cheer him, and he was meant to be a heel, we just didn't put him on TV, and we waited for the noise to calm down. I'm sorry, but that's anti-booking. The timing, of course, just got worse and worse because in 1999, Bret Hart lost his brother Owen. And dare I say, from that point on, he probably lost his passion for wrestling too. So this was just wrong place and wrong time. And it's Bret Hart, man. He is the absolute GOAT. Maybe everybody could have done better here. It just didn't click. Number 3, everything Vince Russo did helped kill WCW. I mean, sure, we've already talked about a lot of it. I mean, Viagra on a pole, Judy Bagwell on a forklift, and that time he told Bill Goldberg to yell at him because he was going to go off script. I'm still not over that one, and it happened 24 years ago. It's important to remember, though, that WCW was already absolutely stupid before this. I mean, way back in 1994, they were doing the Dungeon of Doom. Go on YouTube today and type in WCW Dungeon of Doom, or there'll be an image there. You think that looks like a cartoon? You need to see it in motion. Before long as well, there was too many people on the roster, and yes, some of them were getting guaranteed contracts that weren't helping the business. But then there was also the Yeti. There was also Oz. There was also this bizarre creation called the DOD, and all of this, yes, came long before Vince Russo ever arrived. In fact, some of these were going down when Russo was helping booking the Attitude Era. I mean, Hulk Hogan beating 70 people in a massive cage match also didn't endear himself to the WCW fans, so I'm not trying to pretend that when Vince Russo joined, he helped WCW, because he did the opposite, but you can't place the blame all on him. It took a lot of people to finally take that place down. Well, we've actually talked about a lot of them today. Number 2, everything at the end sucked. I mean, not quite, as we've already talked about, a lot of the year 2000 was utter garbage, but you still get Scott Steiner totally reinventing himself and becoming a main eventer, and I ain't ever gonna get mad at Booker T finally becoming a world champion. That was long overdue. The Cruiserweights, of course, are also working super hard to get over this stupid Oklahoma shit. And come 2001, the company actually hit a massive reset button, and if you do go watch the last couple of shows, you're like, wait a minute, maybe they are going to get back on the right path, before the call came in from Mr. Kellner and it was gone. I really do think if they were able to trumble on past March, they actually would have found a second lease of life, because I think they finally realized we're in dire straits here. But that's history, man. Sometimes if you do miss your mark, well, you never get a second chance. Number 1, they always copied WWE. I mean, you still get this today. AEW copied WWE. WWE copied AEW. It's not a thing, man. Wrestling is cyclical, and it's been around for so many years, every idea has been done. So it's about taking that concept and reimagining it in your own image. If you get it right, more power to you. The truth is, in many ways, during the late 90s, a lot of what WWE and WCW was doing came from ECW, and it most definitely came from Japan. Once again, though, when World Championship Wrestling did get this right, it was the World Wrestling Federation who kind of popped over like, oh man, maybe we should do a bit of that. I mean, look at the NWO and then look at the birth of D-Generation X. That's not a coincidence. It's because Shawn Michaels went to Vince McMahon and was like, have you seen what they're doing? It's like interesting, mature adult entertainment, and we really should be doing that too. I mean, the New World Order also felt totally fresh when it came to American shores, and essentially gave birth to the idea of the wrestling stable we still see today. And if you want to make the argument that WCW had Starrcade before WWF had WrestleMania, have at it, dude. There's the comments. You've got a lot of evidence. It's also only fair to point out that a lot of the things Eric Bischoff did for Monday Nitro totally changed the game, and Raw pinched those as well, like going 2 hours live on Monday nights. I mean, for years, all wrestling companies are like, well, we'll do the live show here and there, but most of our stuff will be pre-taped in order to save some cash. And it was like, nope, I want things to feel fresh and exciting. And look where we are now, we never look back. So actually, during that 83 weeks, it was WCW that had the edge over the WWF. I don't mind that the WWF copied a lot of that. Paul Heyman probably might, because a lot came from ECW, but I'm not going to worry about that now, because it almost happened 30 years ago. So even after today's video, of course, you are still allowed to think these things. I mean, it's your life. Pretty sure that's what Bon Jovi was singing about. As AEW is on a tear right now, though, all of a sudden these same old conversations do prop up, where people point their fingers going, well, I think this, and this is most definitely true. When actually, what I think we should do is sit down in a room, kind of like we're doing now, and have an educational and intellectual discourse that's much better than throwing mud unless of course you're in some kind of mud throwing contest. So I am Simon Miller, and I think we should do that right now. So here's 15 misconceptions about AEW that may not be true. Number 15, Kenny Omega isn't presented as a big enough star. Now there is some truth to that, in the sense you could get Kenny Omega every single title in the company and allow him to Goldberg all of his opponents, and I would still be like, I don't know, man, we probably could give him a little bit more, because the truth of the matter is Kenny Omega is a generational talent. Once he has retired, you're never going to see another guy like him. When you do follow through his AEW career, though, I actually think we are massively underestimating it. Because at first he was playing sort of like the pseudo babyface when he felt like Hangman Adam Page, and that was all designed to allow Kenny Omega to go mega heel when he was totally insane, before doubling back round on this and losing that world championship to Hangman Adam Page in order to create some kind of synergy and to tell you, oh hi, we are telling long-term stories, and actually they're pretty flipping good. I mean, Hangman's coronation at Full Gear 2021 was a wonderful telling to the audience. By the way, we are going to make you feel good and sure you feel warm and fuzzy in your tum-tum, and Kenny was just on fire that evening. So certainly don't say, oh my gosh, we've never had the Kenny Omega from New Japan. Go and watch this performance. It is really, 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 really good. He then took some time off to deal with injuries before he came back for a little bit until Brawl Out happened and he had to go home again. But when he was back in early 2023, he was presented as the guy. So he was taken on for Kingo, everyone was like, oh my gosh, it's Kenny Omega versus Vikingo. When he was taken on Will Ospreay, everyone was like, oh my gosh, it's Kenny Omega versus Will Ospreay. He even did this with Chris Jericho too, in a totally different way, because they teamed up. Now, a few people thought that was a little bit confusing, but the whole idea was Chris Jericho was teaming with Kenny Omega. That just went to show the star power Kenny did have. You couldn't pull that off of anybody. Like if it was me, people would be like, oh, this is stupid. Who's the bald guy? Bald life. People then get really weird and say, well, Kenny Omega needs to dress more like a star. I don't care how somebody dresses. And in fact, I'd much rather, if you were trying to play an authentic babyface, you dressed like your authentic self. Like, I understand the idea of a suit and all of that, but if you're trying to be different and you're trying to stand out in your own way, well, it actually makes more sense to do that with your clothes too. So from my vantage point, that never made Kenny any less of a star, to use that word again, and he just has aura. I know that's a ridiculous 2025 word, but whether he was in New Japan or whether he was in AEW, every single time he walked to the ring, you could feel it in your bones. We are all in for a treat. That is my explanation of a star. More recently, there was some extra noise as well when he did return from diverticulitis, so people saying, oh my gosh, he should be the world champion again. But Omega himself talked about this on the Wrestling Observer Live podcast. He doesn't feel like he can get to that level anymore, and he needs crazy recovery time after he does do a match. So it makes more sense that he slots in kind of in the middle of the card and just adds to the overall power of whatever show you're watching. Thank goodness for that as well, because screw the hierarchy, I'd rather he was healthy. But the fact of the matter is, AEW today would not be AEW without Kenny Omega and all the magic that he brought to the company. I mean, you could even say without Ken, there wouldn't be an All Elite Wrestling to begin with. When you kind of look at it that way, well, he's a pretty damn flippin' big star. Number 14, Mercedes Moné has creative control. I mean, for goodness sake, I did a whole video about this because he got so out of control, and I will reiterate my first point from that one here as well. Who the flub cares? Let's say Mercedes Moné does have creative control, which she doesn't, by the way. I'll get to that in just 1 second. I just hope she books herself in really good matches and I can enjoy it. And if they suck, all right, I can step outside into my real life and go, man, I have actual problems here. I'm not going to worry about that. Also, do you think in 2025, after everything has happened with other people that have had this in their contract, Tony Khan or Triple H is agreeing to that? No. No, they're not. They're not idiots. They understand. They wouldn't let it happen. I mean, the fact that Mercedes Moné lost it all in 2025 totally disproves this anyway, because you would think, what, her big plan was, hey, Tone, here's the deal. I'm going to win on all these smaller shows and all these smaller pay-per-views, but when we get to AEW equivalent of WrestleMania, I think I should lose. Nobody who actually wants creative control would say that. They'd be like, I'd like to win all the time, see Hulk Hogan. So it stands to reason what actually happened is they sat down and went, wouldn't it be great if I did go on a massive winning streak, and then timeless Tony Storm whoops my ass at All In. Can you believe it worked? I mean, the saddest part about all of this is the people that are actually moaning about this bought a Mercedes Moné in-character interview where she joked that she did have this in her deal. I mean, come on, man. Talk about falling for a hook, line, and sinker. If you are actually watching that thing and believing there's an ounce of truth to it, well, I've got a wonderful Ponzi scheme to sell you. And listen, I am totally sure that Mercedes does have input into her storylines, but to point, One, that's not the same as creative control and Tony Khan would still have the final say. And two, all top guys get this, every single one, no matter what the company is. Roman Reigns convinced WWE to hold off Cody Rhodes finishing his story for an entire year, and now we can look back in hindsight and go, good work, Tribal Chief, you got it 100% right. Do you think The Undertaker didn't have a chat with Vince McMahon here and there and said, listen Vince, I get you want to go in this direction, but how about this? And Stone Cold Steve Austin was all about it. Honestly, you can find so many stories of creative people going up to Steve and saying, Steve, what do you think of this? And Austin going, nope, I don't like it. And he wasn't trying to be a jackass. He just understood his character and he was trying to protect himself. Go and read all the stuff about Sable, and they teased that on TV, where one day the Rattlesnake was like, nah, this is crap. So the whole chat is just silly, and the truth of the matter is that Mercedes is a massive star in AEW, so she will have access to certain privileges based on the experiences and the stuff she's already done in the business. Words to that effect. It's no different to movies either, by the way. Do you think Leonardo DiCaprio auditions for movies anymore? Of course he doesn't. He broke through. So I'm sorry you don't like Mercedes Moné, which you're perfectly allowed to, by the way. No one's going to make you. But to fall into this trap, well, it's utterly ridiculous. Number 13, All Friends Wrestling. Thankfully, we moved on from this now, but it was a term that was used when AEW was first brought into this world, that apparently if you were friends with Kenny Omega or Cody Rhodes or the Young Bucks, you would just be hired, because why the flub not? I mean, for starters, I don't really see the issue with this, in the sense everybody in life, no matter what their job, does it. I mean, you can work in an HR department and a role comes loose and you ring up your mate and say, you're not going to believe there's a position, I'll put in a good word. What makes it even odder is that none of these people were ever treated like forces. Like, do you remember Michael Nakazawa and Brandon Cutler? They were basically stooges for the elite, and they would always get involved in the comedy spots. And listen, as a man who is in wrestling in terms of doing it, some wrestlers are like, yeah, I don't want myself to look like an idiot, so you're going to have to go out there and find individuals that would, and those two are totally cool. So it really was Kenny Omega just knowing some folk and saying, hey man, we should bring them in. And it was the same with John Moxley and Marina Shafir. So many people are like, oh man, it's just because they're buddies. And ever since then, Marina has come across like an absolute warrior that you don't want to mess with. I mean, she's been an integral part of the Death Rider. Even Jake Hager was just the muscle in all of Chris Jericho's groups that sometimes wore a hat. And even Luther. You can get mad at Luther, but I got 3 words for you. Timeless Tony Storm. Nobody could have played that role better. Even the Jack Perry heel push happened because of CM Punk and nothing to do with the Young Bucks. And actually, that's a great example of this, because it kind of didn't work and it kind of didn't click in the way that everybody was expecting to. And for a good old while, Jack Perry hasn't been on TV, because I can only assume that Tony Khan was like, listen, we need to come up with something new, go home and we'll have a chat. You also have to put together some sort of a roster with the talent that is available, which is what AEW did in 2019. And look at the dudes that came in. Eddie Kingston, awesome. Penta, awesome. Phoenix, awesome. Orange Cassidy, awesome. I mean, the list goes on, so this one is just silly. Of course, you're going to reach out to people you are familiar with because you have a relationship. It's not like anybody went and dropped the ball. Number 12, the Malachi Black chat. So I suppose the misconception is that Tony Khan fumbled Malachi Black, or at least that's what the WWE hardened fans shouted when he returned to WWE as Aleister Black. I actually don't think any of these things are accurate. In fact, I actually think Malachi was presented as some kind of warrior of death alongside Brody King and Buddy Matthews, and some of the trios matches they had were totally awesome, and they had that crazy atmosphere in their spooky entrance. They were just a very enjoyable and entertaining part of Dynamite. And sure, he never really broke out as a top tier contender at the main event level, but he still had all that stuff with the TNT title and Cody Rhodes, which I personally quite liked. And he also had that match within a match, when him and Kenny Omega basically went off on their own, even though technically it was a trios bout. I mean, that thing is still flipping excellent. And sure, maybe there was some hesitance to lose, but nobody can actually prove that, like it's just hearsay on the internet. And it was also meant to be spooky wooky, so you don't want to get beat too much, because otherwise you'd just be a guy walking around acting like they got magical powers or something, and you get in the ring and get your ass kicked. And even if he did say no to certain things, it still felt to me like Tony Khan worked with him a lot. I mean, there were a couple of absences here and there, but he'd always return to TV, and then he'd always be in a big profile. It's not like he was ever jobbed out or anything. So I think this was probably just two people trying to figure out their creative, maybe not being entirely on the same page, and then they figured out what they could do, or they had a compromise. Welcome to the world of work. So it just feels like a bigger conversation started here because of speculation that was being thrown out outside of the company. And yeah, again, maybe he should have had a main event run, but he didn't. You can say that about a lot of individuals. I don't think it needed to become the conspiracy theory that it actually did. Number 11, the Ricky Stark stuff. So I don't really know what to say, and I think more of us need to do this, because everything based on the AEW versus Ricky Starks conversation is nothing but speculation. Like, there's no evidence. And when you ask Tony Khan, he was always like, nope, had a great time working with Ricky Starks. When you talk to Ricky Starks, he's basically like, well, I'm not going to talk about that. Let's just draw a line under it. It's always other people that run out there and go, well, he said this, so it must mean this, which then becomes fact, which is nonsense. But if you watch Ricky Starks on the Cody Rhodes or the Chris Van Vliet podcast, he kind of seems quite blasé about it. Like, quite clearly something happened he wasn't entirely happy with, but he's moved on, he's in NXT, he's doing good work. He seems pretty happy. So whatever the truth may be, both have decided to keep it professional. So once again, well, it kind of ties into the Malachi Black stuff. They probably did have a disagreement at work, and then you go off on your separate pathways. It's not a wrestling thing. It's not a football thing. It's not a soccer thing. It's not an NFL thing. It's life. Sometimes you go to your place of employment and you can't really get on the same page. The word fumble then gets used a lot again, but I think that is massively unfair, because not only was Ricky Starks an awesome TNT champion, but some of the matches he's had. Do you remember that strap bout with Bryan Danielson? That thing is absolutely crazy. And also a bit like torture, like it massively goes off the rails. So ultimately, if I were to hazard a guess, I would just say there was a fracture in their relationship. And of course, that's where the sad part comes in. Ricky Starks did vanish from TV, and you never want that. I don't think all of a sudden you need to start making mountains out of molehills. I'm sure Rick was a little bit like, oh, this is totally unfair. But look, it worked out in the end, and we always see this in wrestling. You can go all the way back to WCW when talent and management fell out and they butted heads. I mean, it sort of ties into this all friends wrestling thing again. You can be buddies, but everybody is trying to get ahead. And if all of a sudden that does fall down a little bit, well, you're going to find yourself in a curious position. Mostly, I just hope both guys are happy right now and enjoying what they are doing. So it was a talking point, I understand that, because we wanted to see Ricky Starks on TV. When you took a step back from it, don't think it was that big of a deal. Number 10, Tony Khan doesn't book big guys. So for a while, sure, I think there may have been an element of truth of this, and even Kenny Omega talked about it on that Wrestling Observer Live podcast. He said, yeah, maybe at one point we didn't have big men slapping man meat. That's not the case now. And then he went and listed a bunch of beasts. Because yeah, it is totally different in 2025. And I'll start with one of the best of the bunch, Samoa Joe. Not only does he have a legendary status given he has been in the business for so long, but the man can do no wrong. And I genuinely think he's one of the best wrestlers ever. There's also Brody King, who kind of loses all the time, but still manages to get himself so over because he's such a talented wrestler. And this powerhouse Will Hobbs, you can tell that AEW is kind of allowing him to bubble under the surface, and eventually we are going to pull the trigger. Miro was also awesomely used too at the start of his Redeemer gimmick, though admittedly that did go bad. And if you want a big man that's just going to kill people, well, let me introduce you to Bobby Lashley. Remember that Dynamite before All In, when he got his leg destroyed by a chair? Don't worry about it. He just shook it off, and he was good to go again. Me personally too will always take some extra beats, because again, I love big men slapping man meat. But if you watch Dynamite right now as me talking to you, this is way better balanced. So you do get your big men, you get your flippy men, you get your technical men. That's what you always want for wrestling. It's meant to be a variety show. Number 9, AEW wrestlers don't sell. Well, you don't watch. You just don't. You heard one person on the internet saying it and you jumped in to join mob mentality, because all you have to do is watch one episode of AEW Dynamite and you will see at least one wrestler sell. And all you gotta do is watch Kenny Omega in any match he's had following his diverticulitis. He acts like his stomach is about to explode. You genuinely get worried for him like he's your dad. I suppose it is the so-called party match that really annoys these people. And listen, I get it, I understand. Everybody goes at 100 miles per hour, but you can't take this form and just paste it across the entire promotion. And also in those party matches, you do still get people selling. I also have 2 points to this, the first of which will annoy you, but what can we do? Wrestling is predetermined, so sometimes we should sit down and go, we can be quite creative here and do whatever we want, so why don't we do a match that goes 100 miles an hour with people popping up and down and left and right and doing all kinds of things? Like, as long as it's entertaining, it's wrestling. That's why you watch to have fun. My second point is, what is the difference between that and when WWE does its bump and feed approach? Like, all of a sudden the babyface has all the power in the world and the heel is going down, they're getting up again, they're going down, they're getting up again. And look, it totally works, because listen to the fan reaction. But it's the same kind of a deal, it's the same kind of thought process. You're just trying to light up the crowd with joy. WWE also absolutely does this too in its mega main events. Go and watch anything that happens at WrestleMania. You get kickouts all over the place. And really, it is just a device to elicit bigger reactions. And you don't have to like it. That can be the kind of wrestling you do turn off and go, no, I'm not interested. But but it's still a part of wrestling, and I'm happy that someone's doing it. Also, just go and watch Hangman Adam Page or John Moxley on that Dynamite after all in 2025. They were walking around like they were about to die. They were most definitely selling. Number 8, all AEW fans are freaks. So somebody actually said this to me the other day, and I pondered to myself, what does that even mean? So I asked, and this person described it to me as, well, you just cheer for anything. Doesn't matter what's going on in the ring, you just make noise. And I was like, oh yeah, what a burden. I'm enjoying my wrestling, sucks to be me. The point is that they accuse AEW of not actually creating this atmosphere, and the fans arrive at the building and decide, well, we're just gonna make noise regardless. But that is like a paradox, because the reason the fans are making the noise is because they like what AEW is doing, and over the last few years they have faith in the product, and therefore they want to cheer. Kind of feel like I need to fall down. I mean, really, we can compare it to Dominic Mysterio in WWE. We boo him because it's fun to boo him, and he does funny reactions, which then tell our brains we should boo him some more. I mean, it's pantomime, man. That's the whole idea. Where it really loses me entirely, though, is when people go, oh man, you're dumb if you're doing this. And that is absolute poppycock. If you have spent your hard-earned money and you are so excited to see a show, you're going to make as much noise as possible. Well, as far as I'm concerned, you're winning at life. I would argue that Tony Khan has just figured out what kind of wrestling his main fan group does want to see, and he's catering with that. And it doesn't always work this way. Do you remember when the Death Riders kind of fell off a little bit? People were not happy, and they sat on their hands. It's not like they were reacting regardless. Now, I'm not trying to pretend there isn't a cult-like entity to all of this. That goes for all of professional wrestling, and really any entertainment medium on the world. You go look at the Marvel and DC threads, those people nuts. But ultimately, there is nothing wrong with somebody finding a way to actually enjoy the thing they have spent their hard money on, which I just said 2 seconds ago, so why am I saying it again? But it's not a criticism, it's not even a misconception, it's just a really stupid thing to say. These people are happy, and the world can be so crap, let them have it. At the same time, though, once again, to use more evidence, I have watched many a Dynamite when the atmosphere is totally dead. So no, this isn't a given, and it isn't, it happens all the time because you're a bunch of freaks. It depends on the wrestling they're seeing in the ring. Number 7, too many botches. Oh, I hate this so much. I hate that word botch because it has such a negative connotation to it. It's a mistake, it's an error, and dare I say, if you are flying around the ring at 120 miles per hour, you're probably gonna slip here and there. What we should be saying is, how do they actually not do this for 95% of the match? If it was me, I'd be falling on my face and crying like tears. I also actually like a botch to use that word because it makes wrestling feel more real. This is where I get confused again. You have people saying that AEW is too fake, and then you get something that is real where somebody slips up, whatever you want to call it, and then we yell at them for that too. It's like, well, they can't win then. Either it does come across as a real life situation and we hate it, or it feels totally, I don't know, like Dreamland cartoon and we hate that too. I mean, you may as well just go to sleep. Also, I just don't think we should criticize wrestlers for this at all. Of course, you should point it out because wrestling is super dangerous and that's why only a select few do it. If you do make a mistake, you are quite literally this close from death. See people fall on their heads all the time. That ain't cool. It's also not exclusive to AEW either, because you see it in WWE, you see it in New Japan, you see it in Ring of Honor, you see it in TNA, and that's mostly because in 2025, wrestlers are taking more risks than ever. That's where the saying comes from, risk versus reward. If you are gonna do something crazy, and you do flub it up, well yeah, you better protect yourself because it could go bad. So as far as I'm concerned, we should be respecting this more, not laughing going, that person botched that and then put it on the internet. I think that's a little bit offensive, to be completely honest with you. They're only doing this for our entertainment. Number 6, too many matches are overly choreographed and rely on kickouts. Now, I'm not trying to pretend that we do not get choreographed matches in AEW, but you also get choreographed matches in WWE. Go and watch most things that go down in NXT. You can see that they practice that. I don't mind. I have no problem with it, especially when it's supposed to be a performance center brand. These people are trying to learn the ropes. If that's the way you're going to feel comfortable and confident, good. Do it. Far better than that than going out and having a bad match on TV. As for the too many kickouts thing, I'm sorry, I'm not accepting that. Go and watch any WrestleMania main event dating back all the way to WrestleMania 17. The Rock would kick out stunners, and then Stone Cold would kick out Rock bottoms, and then Stone Cold would kick out stunners, and The Rock would kick out Rock bottoms, and all you had to do was look at the 50,000 people in attendance and go, they're having the best time. It's probably something that all promotions could use going forward. And admittedly, we did spam that button, but somehow in 2025 it still works. Also, choreographed wrestling, if we are going to use that ridiculous term, is a form of wrestling. You're allowed to turn it off, but AEW is doing nothing different than the independent scene wasn't doing, and the independent scene usually tells you, this is the direction of travel when it comes to sports entertainment, and that's why it's awesome that AEW embraced it, because it means it feels nothing like WWE, who does choreographed matches too, but in their own way. I don't want those two entities coming together. I want them to be original creations. So it's just not criticism. It's just not. And also, wrestling is choreographed. I wrestle. I don't want to ruin the game, but you already know this. You go backstage, you meet your opponent, and you say, how should we start? How should we finish? Then the bit in the middle, you kind of call in the ring. That's wrestling. That's all it is. So you're actually getting mad at the thing that you love. Number 5, AEW wasted Okada. Now look, if you like the presentation of Okada in New Japan, fine, I get it. You're allowed to be a little bit mad about this, but it's not a steadfast rule, because while I actually think Okada in New Japan is one of the best wrestlers ever, the bizarre transformation he went through when he arrived in AEW, I'm gonna say this quietly, that's my favorite version of the character. And actually that is the most important word there, character, because he was quite stoic in New Japan, but when he arrived as part of the Elite, this guy was absolutely hilarious, just having a whale of a time, and because he was having fun, that came out of the TV and smacked me in the head, and I was having fun too. Remember when he was in the producer's chair and he cut off Max Caster's rap? It's still genuinely one of my favorite moments to happen in modern day wrestling. I watched it about 42 times. That says more about me than anything else. But my gosh, I love it. I also kind of think as a performer, Okada probably saw this. Oh my gosh, I can try something different here. And it's like an actor that gets typecast in a movie. If all of a sudden you do get a new role and that allows you to show off your acting chops, you embrace the idea. And I think that's what Okada did too. Also, he still comes across like a superstar. Remember when AEW changed his theme song and everyone had a meltdown? I don't think that happens if you do not hold this person in high regard. So I've got no problem with it whatsoever, and I actually think it would have been lazier just to take New Japan Okada and throw him into AEW. And also, we've still got time. He ain't that old. He'll probably bring it back before long when he does go on his babyface run. I ain't worried about it. Number 4, the feeling is coming back. So this is a phrase that Tony Khan used over and over again, and the fans got mad, or I suppose the anti-AEW people got mad, because they were like, no, there's no feeling coming back. But it's actually Tony Khan was right, because I stand here in mid-2025, right after All In 2025, everybody is having a really good time with AEW. So yeah, the feeling is back. And the misconception of this comes in the form that it will go away again. And it will happen with WWE and TNA, who are on upward swing at the moment, because wrestling is cyclical. Sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down, sometimes it's bang in the middle, and you kind of feel that as fans. Like, how many times have you watched WrestleMania? You're like, oh my gosh, WWE is the best thing ever. Then that kind of trails off a bit. Then AEW does something cool, like, oh my gosh, AEW is the best thing ever. And you kind of look at yourself like, wait a minute, I'm experiencing multiple emotions. That's pro wrestling. It happens with movies too, like you can watch a bunch of comedies and think they're great, then all of a sudden you'll be knee deep in horror. That's why you never need to get deep down in the ditches when it comes to these sort of a theme. I mean, it really comes down to the fact that wrestling never ends. There's no off season. You do get Dynamites and Raws 52 times a week every single year, which is totally nuts. You just have to accept the good with the bad sometimes. There isn't one human person on this planet that could be creative for that much content. There really is no feeling, and there is no like, oh my gosh, we're on fire right now. It is just what it is. In 6 months, it will more likely be the opposite. Number 3, AEW needs to appeal to casual fans. Why? Why does it need to appeal to casual fans? Are you a casual fan that wants to watch AEW? Well, you're perfectly allowed. But I would hazard a guess that people are saying this are hardcore fans, and what do you care that a casual fan does? Unless you're financially invested in AEW and you'd like to see an increase in business, I don't see why this is a problem at all. And actually, because I watch wrestling from my vantage point only, because I am me, I don't want casual fans to start watching AEW. That's not true, of course I do, because I want them to be successful. But I kind of think when you do have a niche these days, it does allow you to do more crazy things, like that Texas Death Match at All In 2025. Now, when Hangman stabbed John Moxley with the fork, I wouldn't necessarily say that was to my taste, but the fact they had the balls to do it, that's what I like to see. Well, no, I didn't like to see it, but really, that's old school wrestling. People always go, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're doing it. Wrestling would never do something like this. Go back to the late 70s, man, and watch some of those territorial promotions. You will fall on the floor. But really, it doesn't need to appeal to anybody, because right now they are financially successful and they do seem to be getting bigger every single year.
I mean, a casual fan could still find AEW and enjoy it. I actually think you're insulting people when you say that. It's like when people go, oh no, if you make a Mario game, it's got to be aimed at a kid, so you've got to simplify it. No, children understand what a good and a bad game is. They just happen to love Mario, so somebody should be able to figure it out. Do you ever play Super Mario 64? That didn't feel like it was designed for a younger demographic. It felt like it was designed for everyone. And of course, like I say, I'm only kidding. I want all wrestling promotions, including WWE and AEW, to continue to grow. But they do not need to find a casual fan base. Or, my alter argument to that is they have got a casual fan base because people see it on the internet all of the time. Like, even if it is a niche, so what? The whole world in 2025 is built on niches. Now I don't know what we're talking about. This just feels like such a lame argument. Number 2, TNA is about to beat AEW. Alright, maybe it is, but I don't know where you've got that logic from because the business metrics tell you otherwise. But this is a terrible thing to do because you are now insulting both of those companies. Because TNA, once again, as I talked to you from the summer of 2025, is on such an upward swing. But still, when you look at the money, they pale in comparison to AEW. And I hope that AEW continues to grow. And I hope that TNA continues to grow as well. Can you imagine if we had 3 awesome brands that we could check out when we act and please, and that would help the wrestlers and increase costs around the place? That sounds absolutely fantastic. So really, this is just tribalistic nonsense as people pretending, oh my gosh, well, if TNA pulled this many people and AEW only pulled this many people, it must mean this. It doesn't mean jack shit, man. It all comes down to the bottom line if you want to talk about how big a company are. And the truth of the matter is, AEW is just bigger than TNA, whereas TNA continues to grow. How is this a bad thing? How have we made this negative? We are living in such a cool wrestling timeline, and we're always looking for the nonsense, dude. I mean, no one's ever going to be able to compete with WWE because they're too big, but everybody else should just be having a ball. And I am. The screw the 3 words above the building. I just love the product. Number 1, AEW doesn't tell stories. Anyone that says that these days to me just isn't watching AEW. I mean, the Death Rider story that did culminate at all in 2025 had one of the best finishes because we had invested so much time into it. Like John Moxley, whoever that is, John Moxley, quite literally being hanged and tapping out because he didn't want to die as Hangman finally revealed that world title from the briefcase. And made me feel emotional, man. And you had the side quest that it was Swerve Strickland that came out to help Hangman at the end. It's flipping great, man. Maybe one of the best tales they've ever told. Speaking of that too, you also had Toni Storm versus Mariah May, which was a year-long story that had so many twists and turns. And there are so many other ones that people seem to want to ignore as well, deliberately of course. And we mentioned the big one, Hangman Adam Page, the Young Bucks, and Kenny Omega. That not only resulted in one of the best tag team matches we've ever seen, but also resulted in Kenny Omega going heel before dropping that belt to Hangman. That was all the way back in 2021, and by that point AEW was only 2 years old. MJF is always involved in these big kind of angles and narratives as well that he kind of helps craft along with Tony Khan. So what are you talking about? They don't have stories. I understand they have a lot of random matches, but by this point AEW's made it very clear that's just the way we're going to do things, and if you don't like it, don't worry about it. But you can still sit down and go, I wonder what direction this angle is going to go in today. And then you get a cliffhanger and you have to tune in next week. And not all the stories are good, that would be unrealistic, but the big ones they have done flub me sideways great. I mean, speaking of Maxwell Jacobs Freeman, everything he did with CM Punk was like feud of the year stuff. And while it kind of did go all over the place for a little while, the Young Bucks being EVPs still had its moments. Plus, as everything was Swerve and the stuff that he's been involved in, I mean, you can really take every major player in AEW and sit down with someone and explain their stories. So of course, they tell stories. How would they not tell stories? How would they still be around in 2025 if every single thing they did was out of the blue? That doesn't make any sense. Just to go back to what I just said, it means you're not watching, man. Turn on the TV, check it out, and if you don't like it, that's fine. But it does exist. I've seen it. Now, of course, somebody will be mad and go, oh, Simon, you just want to get a job at AEW, even though I've been doing this job for 9 years, and no one's ever offered me a job there or WWE. Also, I'd take that job, and I'd be the first one to tell you I'm an honest Alan or an honest Harry. Neither of them work. The point is this. TNA has to be one of the most interesting wrestling promotions in history because they've been going since 2002, and you could quite literally make the argument right now they are bigger than ever. They just don't go away. They're like moths. Now, the name alone should have caused far more controversy than it did, especially today. You can go and Google that. But given it has been around for so long, there are so many misconceptions about total non-stop action. So I am Simon Miller. Welcome to WhatCulture Wrestling. And I thought we should take 8 of them and dive right in and and finally settle things for good. Number 8, the Hulk Hogan era was the worst of all the eras. Now, I'm not going to debate you that when Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff did walk through the TNA doors, the quality didn't head towards the floor. I mean, 1, they just brought in all their friends. 2, they essentially pushed the TNA original guys to one side, and they decided to compete with WWE by going head-to-head on Monday nights. So what the flub are you doing? We were 10 years removed from the Monday Night Wars. Just leave it. It really did strip away anything that was unique about the promotion, and we even tried to get an NWO storyline going again, which nobody wanted, and talking about the angles, they were so damn bizarre. If you have never seen the skit between Hulk Hogan and Abyss, you will not believe it. Hulk Hogan gives him his Hall of Fame ring and then kind of pretends, hey Abyss, you can now be the Green Lantern. And what's even more crazy is that it actually worked. Abyss had powers. Now the truth is, it actually got even worse when these two did leave, because 2013 onwards, TNA just had no identity, had no personality, because they were dealing with the fallout of Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff. I mean, you could watch weeks and weeks and weeks of TV, and it felt like nothing was happening. It also meant there was nobody to steady the ship as TNA desperately searched for a new direction, and then Spike TV, their network, turned around and said, we don't want you anymore, and kicked them off, which meant they bounced from here, there, and everywhere. Once again, if you were a regular viewer, it was actually hard to find what flipping channel they were on. So it meant that it was a challenge to even watch the thing, and after a while, all of these stars that had helped build TNA decided, man, I don't want to be here anymore, and they left for other promotions. I mean, TNA even lowballed AJ Styles in 2016, which is when he went to New Japan and became a bigger sensation than he already was. It really is another reason why we have to celebrate TNA's existence today even more, because they went through a right barren patch, and almost every single week people going, they're going to die. Yet they never did. Number 7, the women were always treated as stars. Now you cannot take away from what TNA has done with its Knockouts division, and you can go back way before anybody else was doing a revolution, and yes, they were shining a spotlight on their female talent, saying this Knockout division women's championship means something. If you want to say anything stupid, you can leave, there's the door. They always had a roster that could absolutely go and could compare with anybody, but let's not also pretend you didn't have the likes of Angelina Love and Madison Rayne doing distraction finishes by flashing their special bits at the referee. Again, don't get mad at me, I'm just telling you what happened. The only reason I do bring that up is that if you do go to TNA's YouTube channel right now, you will see it is the most watched clip they ever have uploaded, and one of the first ever women's matches they did in the promotion was a lingerie battle royal to crown Miss TNA. And the second person to win that was a man named Bruce, and we gave him that because he was gay. So there was a lot of Attitude Era nonsense still around. It got even lower because the late great Daphne even said that she felt forced to do a striptease angle. So you've got to ask, who was this for? And this is not me trying to take away from the Knockouts division. TNA were well ahead of the game, and more people should have taken inspiration from them. But there were still some certain segments that made you want to smash your head into a wall. Number 6, TNA was never original. Well, this one is just utterly ridiculous. I mean, go and watch anything they did with the X Division back in the day. But you can even go to Slammiversary 2025. We had that ladder match, and at one point the Hardy Boys wanted to climb a damn ladder, but all the metal ones were gone, so a magical rope ladder was thrown down, and Jeff climbed that instead. Now, of course, it makes no sense, but it does in the world of sports entertainment, because we always do this fun stuff, but it's instant proof that TNA always take a sit back and go, what can we do that's different? That really always has been the way, and I'm not saying that all these concepts were good. I mean, look at Lockdown, which sounds like a kid came up with it. Why don't we put all matches in a steel cage? Well, the answer is, when you get to steel cage match number 6, and you've already seen 5 steel kill matches, well, you're a little bit bored of steel cage matches. It'd be like eating pizza every day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Actually, that one would be pretty good. There are also character changes like Dustin Rhodes coming in as Black Rain, that I think was meant to be TNA's answer to The Undertaker. But let's just be completely honest here, it wasn't very good. TNA also loved to murder wrestlers in order to write them off TV, and look, that is always going to split the audience right down the middle. It depends what you want from pro wrestling, but some of these were so well thought out and exceptionally dumb. Well, I am never going to criticize it, because once again, it made TNA stand out. We mentioned the X Division as well, so you have to go straight to the Ultimate X match, which really did change the game. If you want to walk into my house and say, Simon, do you think that influenced the wrestling we see on TV today? I'd be like, you bet your ass. There was even that Gut Check show, which actually felt like the best version of a wrestling reality program, which more people should rip off, and we did the Reverse Battle Royal. Now that is one of the worst things that wrestling has ever come up with, but at the same time, it was totally, woefully brilliant. and we should do it again. Number 5, they didn't benefit from the AEW partnership. Now, of course, a lot of this is because TNA have teamed up with WWE, and as soon as you do that, the tribalistic fans have to walk out and say, we told you that AEW never did anything with TNA. I mean, look what they're doing now with WWE. It's boring, and I don't want to get into it. At the end of the day, though, we are just mere observers, so let's go right to the horse's mouth, because Stockton Moore, who was the president of TNA at the time, well, he quite literally said all of these words. At the time, Impact was really struggling to garner traction. We were doing our damnedest and putting out everything we could, but really struggling to find ourselves. Getting Kenny Omega as Impact World Champion and getting the Good Brothers featured on AEW show, from a business point of view, the 2 Kenny pay-per-views were 2 of the 3 highest pay-per-views the company had at that point. Even the one with Christian when he came in was pretty high when it came to buys. There was a lift in business and viewership. Massive lift on social views and monetization. Anything that was Kenny Omega monetized, well, did it have its hindrances? As far as what some of the strengths were, sure. That's why it ultimately had to end. But while doing it, there's no question from a financial point of view, it had its benefits. There is no questions when it came to eyeballs, buzz, and legitimacy. It certainly helped. So there you go, next point. Number 4, they also aren't benefiting from the WWE partnership. See, what did I tell you? That usually comes up after somebody has shouted about TNA and AEW. If you're part of that clan, what you do is turn back and say, ha ha, look at TNA and WWE, that also sucks. Even though, quite frankly, as far as I'm concerned, neither of them sucked at all. But yes, TNA getting in bed with WWE has been absolutely great for their business. Once again, look at Slammiversary 2025. They grossly broke their attendance record, and they had over 7,000 people in that building. And trust me, anything over 5,000 should be celebrated. That's a lot of humans. As soon as AJ Styles announced that pay-per-view 2, tickets went up, so you actually have people that are moving the dial. And I actually think the TNA World Champion, at the point Joe Hendry, being on WrestleMania is massive, and I know he got taken out in 3 minutes. But if you've never heard of the damn promotion, and you did see Joe Hendry, and you were, I want to get more wrestling in my life, there is more chance you will check it out than not featuring it at all. And anybody that goes, yeah, but it made TNA and Joe Hendry look stupid. Did it though? And is that really how fans think? Unless you do have an agenda, I think it is. Now, of course, it's not all peaches and cream, and it is very rare to see a TNA guy beat a WWE guy. And just go and look at how JC Jane lost that Knockouts Championship. But it goes back to what Scott D'Amore said, although I'm sure he doesn't care about it anymore. If you are looking at a net positive, ever since they did shake hands, well, it's just seen TNA go up and up and up and up and up. Number 3, they only signed former WWE stars. So, of course, if you've watched any of my other content, you know I hate this, because for 20 years, WWE was basically the only place in town you could go if you wanted to make some money. So loads of individuals right now are going to be former WWE stars, but that isn't what defines them. They're just human beings being professional wrestlers, and if they left WWE, they're allowed to go to the hell wherever they want, and you can't just say, I can't believe it. Like I say, I would probably go as far to say 82% of wrestlers right now are former WWE guys, because once again, there was nowhere else to go. Calm down. It really is why using this as a stick to throw at TNA is totally unfair. Look at somebody like Dolph Ziggler, who of course arrived in TNA as Nick Nemeth. He had been in the WWE system in years, but can anybody possibly say he hasn't been of benefit to TNA? I doubt it. I think he's been really, really good, and he got more eyes on the thing. But look at somebody like Bryan Danielson when he joined AEW. You could say that he was an ex-WWE guy. He was there for years, but because he had his big indie run, for some reason that gives him a special pass. The whole thing is just stupid. The last couple of years makes it even more unfair, because look at some of the people that have come through the TNA doors. I mean, you've got Leon Slater, who's a UK star that is absolutely going to break out even bigger eventually. Mance Warner was a dude that basically reinvented how to do death matches, and nobody thought he would get a shot on a bigger stage, but TNA did it. And you've even got the likes of KC Navarro. Now, I've actually performed on shows with KC, and everybody knew the same thing. This dude just gets it, he's gonna go right up there. It always feels as well like TNA tries to use all their signings. Nobody gets signed for the sake of being signed. I mean, what did they do way back in 2006? They signed Kurt Angle, and they broke the flipping internet. And they've not all worked out, and certain eras of TNA have been worse for this. But to act like that's all they do, well, I think you've totally missed the point, or willingly ignored it. Number 2, TNA is just a stepping stone. I think there was a period of time where this was sort of true, like when WWE once again was the big dog and New Japan had that explosion. It did kind of feel like many members of the TNA roster started looking left and right, going, maybe we can jump ship and earn a lot more money. Even today, you could say the likes of Joe Hendry, Jordan Grace, and Mike Santana also have this idea in their head. But once again, you are ignoring the majority of the roster here. Take somebody like Moose. He has received so many contract offers from other promotions. He's like, nah, man, I'm staying here. I like it. This is for me. Eddie Edwards also joined the roster in 2014 and became a permanent fixture of TNA, and he's never gone anywhere else. Then you got Brian Myers and Chris Bay, who signed back in 2020. Steve Macklin did it in 2021, and Rosemary basically feels a part of the furniture, and I mean that as a compliment. I really do feel like any of those could put out feelers, but they decide to stay in TNA, and now they're just benefiting even more because they can pop up on NXT too. So lots of people have decided that TNA is their HQ, it is their home, it is the promotion they want to see flourish, and I think you could actually see that in the numbers right now. Not only have they become bigger stars, but more people seem like they're tuning in. Number one, they were always the number 2 North American promotion. When Dixie Carter revealed that she was no longer working with Hulk Hogan, do you know what she said her plans for TNA were? To make it the biggest wrestling promotion in the world. Now that was so damn silly because even 12 years ago, everybody knew that wasn't possible. Like WWE is always going to be the biggest game in town. They have too much money, they have too much exposure. And if this actually is your plan as the head of a company, well, you're headed for disaster. I mean, you can even go back to 2009 when Ring of Honor was absolutely kicking ass. And while it may not have been more popular than TNA, it did kind of fall into the same bracket. So you had Ring of Honor, you had TNA, you had New Japan. All of them were essentially operating on the same level. I don't think TNA was still above them going, ha ha, we're the best. You could probably throw CMLL in there as well. And essentially what most fans did is they saw all of those companies as a non-WWE package. So if you were done with what Vince McMahon were doing, well, you just jumped around each of these instead. When 2019 came around, there was no two ways about it. AEW absolutely went into numero 2 position. And also, yes, Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff did make sure that TNA went through that horrible lull after they did leave. And at that point, I'm sorry, you could not call them number 2, it just wasn't true. Even right now, though, once again, they should always be aiming for a special niche because you cannot knock WWE off its perch, and nor should you even want to care. There is so much wrestling content to go around, and really, there are a lot of lapsed fans as well. They want an alternative, they want something that feels a bit more old school. So if you have the power and the creativity to do that, you should at least give it a go. That's not to knock TNA either, because again, I think they have absolutely amazing. And as of me talking to you, they have been around 23 years. I mean, compare that run to WCW, TNA absolutely wins. So ECW died in 2001, and people today still love it. That is a testament to Paul Heyman and everything he created. I mean, those 3 letters still get shouted at him when he does walk to the ring, and the ECW Arena, as it is known, well, it's still called the ECW Arena, and when any wrestling company runs there, everybody talks about Extreme Championship Wrestling. As we are running through some wrestling misconceptions, though, from the last 30 years, it is time to look at ECW, and you know the deal. What's true? What's not? Number 12, Paul Heyman started the company. But he didn't. Let's move on. Now, I'm only kidding, but actually this promotion was started as Eastern Championship Wrestling in 1992, and the man behind it all was a dude named Todd Gordon. At the time, they were just another indie promotion or a regional company, whatever you want to call it. They were just over there in Philadelphia doing their own thing. I mean, they even worked with the NWA, because everybody worked with the NWA, when all of a sudden Paul Heyman got connected with them in 1993, kind of as a creative consultant. And all of a sudden, he was booking the thing, and that's when everything went nuts. Out went the National Wrestling Alliance, because Heyman thought they were way too old, and in came barbed wire steel chairs, and an accession with blood that would turn these fans into a rabid audience. It all went off in 1994 when Shane Douglas won the NWA title, and Paul Heyman told him to throw it on the floor, because nobody wants that old school fuddy-duddy trash. And to this day, a lot of people would tell you that's when the true ECW was born. But it wasn't Paul Heyman that actually built this thing out of bricks, whatever you want to call it, but he was the dude that turned it into an absolute phenomenon. Number 11, it was always a cult underground promotion. You know what the vision is, or at least what we talk about today. It was bingo halls and VHS tapes, and again, that crazy crowd. And absolutely, that was a huge part of ECW. Until for a very short period it wasn't. Because by the late 90s, ECW had grown exponentially, and not only were they on a national television deal, but you could buy action figures in Toys R Us. I mean, there was also a flipping video game along the way, so even though it didn't last long, like we just touched upon, for just a brief moment, you could even call ECW mainstream. I mean, I'm exaggerating slightly, but it's also sort of true. The turning point really did come in 1999 when they were able to get on the TNN network, which is a stupid way to say that. But the ratings were pretty decent too. I mean, occasionally they even outdrew WWF Sunday Night Heat. I mean, even the odd rock star would go, oh man, I really like this ECW when the TNN deal did go bad. I mean, they weren't in sync at all. When it kind of came across that the only reason they'd done this was as a trial, because they wanted to work with the WWF instead. That's what happened, they signed up Raw. Of course, during that whole time too, WWF and WCW would steal a lot of their talent away. So it was always a niche kind of a product, but don't pretend it was always under the radar, because there was like 6 months there, man, when it really could have blown up. Number 10, it was a financial disaster since day one. I mean, we know the stories. Bounce checks, an unpaid roster, Jim Ross all of a sudden being joined by Paul Heyman on WWF commentary. There's always this idea that WCW was living money to money, week to week, and just trying to hold on. And actually, once again, that's not 100% true. Because for most of the time, ECW was pretty stable. Like, it was nowhere near as big as WCW or the WWF, but because they had this fierce fan base, you could kind of go, well, if we go to that venue, this many people will come, so why don't we try and budget accordingly? He also had mad VHS sales and did very well on merchandise, so even though Paul Heyman did have to borrow a lot of money, it wasn't like he would wake up for every single TV show going, oh my gosh, how are we going to do this? He was always able to get it done. But at one point, it even made a small profit. This actually goes back to the TV deal, because oddly, that is when the wheels came off. Because what should have been rocket fuel to the top just became a sparkler to nowhere, because of course ECW wanted to increase their production so they looked good on television to try and compete with WCW and WWE. Then when the TV deal went bad, they spent all this money, they weren't making the revenues, the pay-per-view companies weren't sending them their checks. That's when it just fell down to disaster. I mean, ultimately, ECW just couldn't compete for what other people were doing. But there was a good few years there, man, that even though they would have been the number 3 promotion, they were actually doing all right. Number 9, that the mass transit incident was a mistake. Not by a long shot. It was just a totally utter miscalculation. Now, most know how awful it was when in 1996, Eric Koulas was able to trick Paul Heyman into him not being a 17-year-old and him being a trained wrestler when he ended up in the ring with New Jack. Oh my gosh, he got beaten half to death. And if you've seen this clip, the amount of blood is horrendous. It really was terrible on all levels, especially because why did nobody stop this halfway through the thing? Once again, if you do sit down and watch it, even you will know this shouldn't be continuing. Yet ECW didn't do a damn thing. So it was an absolute disaster and a proper rookie mistake. And not only did it lead to bad media press, but it led to lawsuits too, because this kind of thing shouldn't be happening in wrestling. It was also an outrage that never really left ECW behind, and I think you just have to call this irresponsible. You can't be like, oh man, I can't believe nobody saw this coming. It was obvious what was going to go down. And also, the big question that hangs above it all is why did nobody check how old the dude actually was? So it was a total fumble that never happened in the first place, and Paul Heyman will be the first guy to tell you that. Let's not act like it was just one big whoopsie. Way more important than that. Number 8, the ECW wrestlers didn't expect to be paid. I mean, who on earth came up with this? Because you do see it sometimes. It all comes down to this idea that the ECW locker room was so loyal, and because Paul Heyman gave these rah-rah speeches, human beings doing a job would be like, you know what, I don't need to get paid. Now, all of that was true in the sense they really did have passion for the product, but these were still real human beings with real lives and real bills, at no point where they were like, yes, I'll forgo my money. They still wanted it. This is where all the stories about IOUs and money owed come from, and sure, there were people like Taz and Shane Douglas and Tommy Dreamer who would stand behind ECW even when they weren't getting a dime, and it all came down to the fact they did believe in the product. But when you hear about all the stories in the locker room, there was so much stress because once more, people wanted their paychecks, man, and they were not getting it. Often wrestlers would just not show up or threaten to work elsewhere. And look at Sabu. He once didn't go to an ECW event because he got offered a show in Japan and he knew that one would pay, so of course he picked that one. So yes, of course the ECW family narrative was absolutely real, but they weren't a bunch of idiots. Nobody was blind to what the reality was as well, and it did cause some very serious problems. Very sadly, you can read about these on the internet right now. Number 7, ECW was only big in Philadelphia. So we've already talked about it. The ECW Arena, which is in Philly, is a very special place for wrestling fans, all because of the love people had for Extreme Championship Wrestling. The local crowds absolutely loved going there and making a lot of noise, but it wasn't contained to just here. That was just the HQ. Because by the late 90s, ECW was doing great in Queens, Buffalo, Chicago, and Florida, and we all know about the Hammerstein Ballroom. I mean, AEW ran there recently. What was the news story that accompanied it? Oh, it's ECW. I mean, it was basically the promotion's second home, and they even got out to California at one point and pulled a decent house. And all of that was before the TNN deal as well, so it all came down to tape trading and people seeing it on local access television and being like, dude, I think we should check this out. Once again, it probably ties into these crowds that just lived and died by this company because they were sick of the WWF and they were sick of WCW. but it absolutely expanded out of one place in the United States of America, and thank goodness it did. To use a cliche, they deserved it. Number 6, WWE hated ECW. Nope, no they did not. I mean, WWF did hate WCW, and ECW definitely hated WCW, but these two are actually quite friendly. I mean, Vince McMahon even had a soft spot for ECW, because I think he saw it as the lovable underdog, and at times he would even send Paul Heyman money in order to keep the place afloat. It's also why on occasion WWF guys would turn up in ECW because they had a working relationship, and let's not forget that on one Raw, RVD went and yelled at Jerry the King Lawler. I don't think that happens by accident. So in many ways, you could call ECW the NXT before it was NXT, because if Vince McMahon did have a wrestler that he felt needed a little bit of seasoning, well, yeah, he'd give him to Heyman and said, you work with him and figure it out. It also came down to the fact that, yes, World Championship Wrestling was the true enemy, so if the WWF could use ECW as some sort of projectile, well, that's what they were going to do. But we talked about Paul Heyman joining Jim Ross on commentary. That all tied into this as well. There was never any beef between the two. They just got on, which is nice. It's like the forbidden door before the forbidden door. Number 5, it was all blood and violence. So this one is really unfair, because if you truly think that, 1, you've missed one of ECW's biggest calling cards, and 2, I don't think you ever watched the program before. And yes, sure, the likes of New Jack Sabu and the Sandman would bring absolute carnage to the ring, but Paul Heyman's big thing was wrestling needs to be a variety show, so I'm gonna go to Mexico, I'm gonna go to Japan, I am gonna find a bunch of stars that nobody's ever heard of, I'm gonna put them in the ring and say, damn it, you're gonna smash this from bell to bell. And they did. I mean, there was Eddie Guerrero, there was Chris Jericho, there was Dean Malenko, there was Tajiri. All of these had what you would call modern day matches, and you could probably put them on television right now and nobody would even notice. You'd also never seen anything like this before, which made ECW so interesting, and the crowds loved it too. I mean, they did want to see somebody get smashed in the chair with a face, or the other way around, but when Eddie Guerrero was doing his thing, well, they were totally mesmerized, because of course they were. It's Eddie flubbing Guerrero. So it really truly was a wrestling buffet where you could just have a little bit of everything, and sometimes that was barbed wire and absolute death. I'm not trying to get away with that, but in terms of depth, so much more. Number 4, WWE saved ECW with One Night Stand. WWE's 2005 One Night Stand pay-per-view is one of the most beloved pay-per-views of all time, because for one night only, as the name suggests, we got to pretend that ECW was still alive. It was just one big celebration, and while the 2006 version isn't as good, you still get that amazing match between John Cena and Rob Van Dam. When, yes, it basically became a third brand for WWE. Vince McMahon became the ECW champion, that was not good. The idea that this was WWE saving ECW, though, is absolutely ridiculous. I'm not 100% sure where it came from. I mean, for one, it didn't need it in the first place, but also, the idea was only greenlit because WWE would roll into certain towns, and what would the crowd chant? ECW. Well, you may as well do something with that, you'll likely make some money. Now, actually, what happened by the time it did get canned again is that WWE had ruined what ECW once stood for, mostly because it got put on the Sci-Fi Network. We don't need to worry about that now. That was a long-ass time ago. It wasn't charity, though. I want to make that very clear. I think that's my point when it comes to this entry. WWE knew it would make them a pretty penny. Flub me sideways it did. Number 3, the spirit of ECW died in 2001. Which is, of course, when it did actually die as a promotion, so I guess now you could see it as just an old relic. Once again, I don't think that's fair at all. Because without ECW, I do not think you get Ring of Honor, which just so happened to pop up 1 year after Extreme Championship Wrestling was dead. I mean, the template there was really serious in the sense realism was at the heart of it. And just go and look at TNA's X Division, which also cropped up around this time. That's got Paul Heyman's fingerprints all over it. I also don't think AEW is born in the guise that it was without Tony Khan being a very young ECW fan. And you've got GCW, CCW, PWG. All of these felt very underground, and all of them kind of feel like they have a touch of the danger about them. They also pack certain arenas and showcase the talent of tomorrow before the bigger companies go in and go, whoop, we're gonna take them. It's all based on the same idea, which means ECW wasn't a flash in the pan. Kind of goes back to what we were talking about. They just didn't have the finances or momentum to carry them through past 2001. But if you want to talk about legacies, flippin' hell, it lives on. Number 2, it never got the right goodbye. So ECW One Night Stand 2005 was seen as a nice goodbye to the brand before it got brought back properly. And sure, the big names were back. We did it in the Hammerstein Ballroom. Paul Heyman cut one hell of a promo. If you do want to be proper diehard about this, though, if you are looking for that gritty, bloody edge that it once had, you're not going to find it at One Night Stand. So with that in mind, it's kind of crazy to me that nobody really mentions Hardcore Homecoming, which actually only happened a few weeks before this event. I mean, for one, it happened in Philadelphia at the ECW arena, where Shane Douglas and a bunch of other ECW guys took the idea of WWE polish, they threw it out the window. My gosh, they presented something that kind of feels like mud. I mean, it was just incredibly raw and the fans were packed in like sardines. And when the wrestlers went at it, but if you want to act like they are tearing each other apart, it's probably because that's what they're literally doing. Terry Funk is there too, and you absolutely have him if you are going to say goodbye to ECW. So while One Night Stand may have been WWE going, see you well later, my friend, or words to that effect, if you wanted to get deep down in the weeds, it's Hardcore Homecoming you want to watch. I mean, it's still a pretty insane show today. Number one, everybody wanted to work there forever. So we kind of touched upon this, but let's get in there deep, because Paul Heyman from time to time will tell you if he had the checkbook to back things up, some wrestlers would have been in ECW until the end of time. And yes, once again, the loyalty was real, but also a lot of this is nostalgia, because that one just is not true. Because a lot of guys did see ECW as a little bit of a stepping stone. I mean, there was Chris Jericho, there was Eddie Guerrero, there was Dean Malenko, there was Raven, there was the Dudley Boys, and there's nothing wrong with this. It's like any kind of a job, you want to keep climbing up the ladder. And they all jumped to WCW and WWE eventually because they wanted more money and they wanted more crowds, and this shouldn't have been taken as a massive insult. Once again, you just want to be the best version of yourself you can be, and you do that in the quote-unquote big league. And even Steve Austin used ECW as a way to go have a career resurgence, and that's how Paul Heyman sold it to him too. We all know you're going to be one of the best, so find a brand new character here before you can go to other companies. And it wasn't just Austin who he sold that dream to. He basically told it to everyone. So there was a family vibe that helped ECW no end, and it did feel far more close connected than the other two. But to act like people walked through those doors and went, yep, I'm going to be here for life, which is somewhat ironic. Well, I guess there's a little bit of a fairy tale to that, but it's still a company, man, and it's still a job, and therefore it still falls to all those old tick boxes. I mean, there's always a new challenge to be tackled at the end of the day, so now make sure you challenge and you tackle in the comments below what was even that came out of my mouth. If you like the video, share the video and subscribe. And if you would like another company and more misconceptions, well, I've covered them too. But otherwise, make sure you have a terrific day. Bold life for life. I appreciate you, my friends. Goodbye.